Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, in the news this week, while North Korea is firing more missiles over Japan, the United States is considering making mini nukes. We'll have the details on those stories. Also, the U.S. national debt has passed a new milestone, and Steve Bannon throws some punches at the Catholic Church. But up first, a city like none you've ever seen, stretching for miles and covering the landscape in an amazingly organized and sustainable fashion. Take a look at this video.
Well, it definitely looks like people as set up for a tremendous amount of people. Be interesting to have that type of setup for the myriad of refugees that are actually making their way out of their homelands.
Right, and for anyone who didn't realize, those were all tents that were set up there.
That's right, that's right. Well, following Hurricane Harvey, Houston City Councilman Dave Martin urged the people of Houston not to give their money or supplies to the American Red Cross. A native of New Orleans, Martin went through Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The councilman made what he called his last rant for the day, directing at the National Red Cross.
Mr. Martin went as far as to refer to the organization as the Red Loss and begged people not to send them even one penny. Now, he said they are the most inept, unorganized organization that I've ever experienced.
Wow. Well, some might think Martin to be crazy, but in his rant at the City Council meeting, which was broadcast to the public, he explained the current situation in his district, saying, I've been in Kingwood fighting this thing, and we have not seen one person, not a single person from the Red Cross. Yet every time I turn on the TV, they're receiving hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, Martin even questioned the Red Cross directly in his speech, asking pointedly, what are you guys doing with it? Referring to, of course, the donations, all the donations they're getting. Well, so then, who is responsible for helping the people of Kingswood and Clear Lake if it wasn't the Red Cross, you might be asking? Well, Martin said it was the community itself with no help from the Red Cross.
Well, this week, President Trump decided to scrap the DACA program, which currently protects around 800,000 young immigrants from being deported. Catholic bishops heavily criticized the president's move. Then 60 Minutes, Charlie Rose interviewed President Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, who made some very controversial comments directing at the Catholic Church for their stance on DACA.
While Mr. Bannon didn't agree with the president's decision himself, he did still sound supportive, saying, I understand how he struggled with it. I understand how he's giving a possibility of a legislative thing. And he said last night, even in a tweet, he would rethink it.
But when reminded that he was a good Catholic and his own Cardinal Timothy Dolan was opposed to what was taking place with DACA, Bannon had this to say about the church and its leaders, saying, the Catholic Church has been terrible at this. The bishops have been terrible about this. By the way, you know why, he asked? because unable to come to grips with the problems in the church, they need illegal aliens. They need illegal aliens to fill the churches, he said.
Well, he explained that is why the Catholic Church is condemning Trump's move against DACA. Mr. Bannon went on to be more blunt about the Catholic Church, stating they have an economic interest in unlimited illegal immigration. Now, when Charlie Rose pointed out to him, that's a tough thing to say about your church, Bannon replied boldly, well, this is about the sovereignty of a nation, and in that regard, they are just another guy with an opinion.
Sounds like a little bitterness there. Well, across the Atlantic Ocean, the Catholic Church is facing more problems. An investigation led by File on 4 program from the Sunday Post, who analyzed death certificates of 400-plus children whose bodies are believed to be buried in a mass grave in Lanark, Scotland. The children were residences of the Smileham Care Home, which was run by Catholic nuns, until it closed in 1981.
The suspected site of the mass grave is a large plot in St. Mary's Cemetery near the old orphanage. Now, while researchers had uncovered the records proving children just months old and all the way up into their teens had died at the orphanage, there were no burial records for any of them. Now, until now, there was very little record noting that they had ever even lived.
Well, among the dead, Francis McCall. He died in 1961 at age 13 from a brain hemorrhage. According to The Guardian, his brother Eddie had heard that he was struck on the head by a golf club. He has told researchers that he has never been able to find any trace of where his brother was buried.
Well, the Daughters of Charity, St. Vincent de Paul, had acknowledged back in 2004 that some residents had died in their care and are buried in this plot. They couldn't provide many details. Now, the grave itself was a total mess. When first discovered, the trash from the rest of the cemetery had been dumped right on that particular spot. And if that wasn't enough to outrage the public, looking directly across from the plot was the well-maintained headstones of the dead nuns.
Seems like sometimes when there's bad record keeping, it's because you don't want anyone to know about your records. Well, Smileham Care was on was in operation for 117 years, and some former residents have alleged they were abused by the nuns. The Daughters of Charity would not comment on the new findings. However, in a statement, they said the ongoing Scottish child abuse inquiry was the best place to investigate what had happened. It is apparent each of these lives was cut short, many through natural causes, but all were dealt with in a manner that showed no care or concern for their lives or those who loved them.
Well, now from Sweden, a journalist is seeking answers as to why a suspect in a rape of a 12-year-old girl hasn't been questioned yet. Now, the journalist recorded his phone call to the Swedish police and shared it with RT News.
The police admitted they had not interrogated anyone yet, even though a month had gone by since the rape was reported. When asked why this was taking so long, the police officer said, "We have so many similar cases and so few people available, we cannot cope with the workload. We have 3-year-old children that get raped."
Well, due to the high numbers, the officer reported, these cases are not getting prosecuted either. The Swedish Minister of Justice and Home Affairs commented on the situation, saying it is not right that the police think that they don't have time to investigate rape crimes. He strongly suggested they need to review their priorities.
Well, some believe the police don't have enough resources, but nonetheless, the stats show the number of sex crimes committed in Sweden have been rising steadily. In the first half of 2017 alone, the number of rape cases was 3,430. That's a 14% increase over last year.
Well, back in America, the national debt has just passed a historic marker of $20 trillion. And you did hear that right, $20 trillion. Now, that final big chunk of change came as part of a $15 billion loan to cover the cost of hurricane relief efforts in the South. Now, usually there would be some talk by the New Yorkers about the debt climbing to such great heights due to a billboard on the side of the IRS building in Manhattan that broadcast the actual amount for many years. However, not anymore.
They tuck it down in an effort to cut costs. Well, the billboard has been removed, and while there is talk of it possibly being relocated, all the wars, foreign aid, subsidies, and programs are still being billed to the U.S. taxpayers, and the current debt amount quietly climbs to unthinkable and now unseeable new heights.
Well, money isn't the only thing the U.S. government is apparently running low on. American officials say the U.S. is also running out of patience. YPN's Larry McGee has the details on the story for us. Larry, how are things here proceeding?
U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, opened a speech to the Security Council recently by stating that enough is enough. The ambassador went on to say that America has taken an incremental approach, and despite the best intentions, it has not worked. Members of the council will no doubt urge negotiations and a return to talks, but as I've just outlined, she stated, we have engaged in numerous and multilateral negotiations, and time after time, they have not worked. The official said that the time for half measures in the Security Council is over. The time has come, she went on to say, to exhaust all of its diplomatic means before it's too late. Ms. Haley stated further that the Council must now adopt the strongest possible measures and that Kim Jong-un's actions cannot be seen as defensive. The ambassador stated that North Korea's chairman would like to be seen as a nuclear power, but being a nuclear power, she says, is not about using those weapons to threaten others. Nuclear powers, says Mrs. Haley, understand their responsibilities, and Chairman Un shows no such understanding. According to the UN ambassador, Kim Jong-un's actions show that he is begging for war. Measured is the direction that Russia and China have chosen to take following the recent test by Pyongyang of a hydrogen bomb. Both of the powers, however, acknowledged a continued commitment to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and stated that they will keep a close eye on North Korea's activities going forward. Meanwhile, the American Treasury Department is reported to be preparing another round of sanctions to submit to the president, while many other leaders have also expressed condemnation of the latest tests. The Secretary General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Yukima Amano, gave a statement saying that the nuclear test by the Democratic Republic of North Korea is an extremely regrettable act. The new test, he stated, which follows on the last two tests last year and is the sixth since 2006, is in complete disregard for the repeated demands of the international community. Other leaders in the arena of international atomic energy are sounding the alarm and warning that the DPRK's nuclear program has reached a serious and different level. There are heightened levels of concern for the many nukes that America is reportedly considering to produce, coming after a recent report released from an online media outlet named Politico. The magazine claimed to have informed government sources who say the low-yield weapons are among the options being considered by a high-level panel created by President Trump to assess the U.S.'s nuclear arsenal. The idea is reportedly up for debate soon in the Senate. Michael Chusodowski of the Center for Research on Globalization says the weapons were originally conceived to go after nations in the Middle East in particular. The analyst says the Pentagon's projecting a dangerous perception that smaller nuclear bombs will be safer for civilians. Commentators say that couldn't be farther from the truth, and that production of smaller nuclear bombs will actually make the use of them more likely. Mr. Chusodowski commented, moreover, that the weapons were labeled for use in the conventional war theater, which makes for a set of circumstances where the bombs could be employed by military officials without necessarily having to get the green light from President Trump. The proposed overhaul of the U.S.'s nuclear arsenal would reportedly total $1 trillion in costs for a 3-year effort designed to modernize the weapons. Critics of the intention cite multiple drawbacks, including the idea that the sum might break the bank for the U.S. or cause deep cuts to much-needed social services. The effort would also violate the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, as the U.S. possesses 7,000 nuclear warheads, which is enough to destroy the entire world. Analysts also say that despite the propaganda, the many nukes are in no way safe, and that furthermore, President Trump's efforts to play up America's nuclear arsenal to intimidate its enemies will not only fail to defuse its current crisis with North Korea, but it also poses a grave threat to world peace. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Yeah, well, that would be kind of interesting. It doesn't seem like making smaller nuclear bombs is going to solve the problem when people are still going to die as a result of continual war. Well, China is emerging as it is currently working on a plan to eliminate the petrodollar from its currency, buying oil contracts for yuan and converting that into gold. That's right, gold. Max Kaiser with RT. The Kaiser report mentioned how similar leaders attempted something similar. For example, Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi tried to trade oil for euros, and both of those men were assassinated. Those two countries now were producers of oil. The U.S. is a mega producer of oil, while China is a mega consumer of oil, with over 29% of its oil imports coming from Russia.
Well, Russia is not the only place that China gets its oil from. Angola, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Oman, Iran, Brazil, Venezuela, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates are other major suppliers that currently trade in the petrodollar, who would be able to trade their oil for gold if this plan goes through. And if it does, Katan, that would surely weaken the dollar and, of course, the U.S. economy, and that's where we're going to get into the situation of possibly thrusting this superpower into a fight to survive mode and actually leading to possibly new wars to protect its economic interest like it's done in the past.
Yeah, because they're going to really want to fight to stay on top, to be that economic superpower within the world.
Right.
Yeah. Well, in South America, Venezuela is feeling the pinch of the U.S. sanctions and is working to exchange oil for other currencies to escape those imposed sanctions. President Maduro said that the country would start selling oil and accepting other currencies, including the Chinese yuan, Japanese yen, and the Russian ruble. He said that an economy free from the U.S. imperialist system was possible.
Well, the country whose sanctions include banks and businesses not being able to work with it has been dealing with a multitude of problems, including political unrest, food and medicine shortages, and, of course, a hard hit to their economy.
Well, Venezuela isn't the only country, as we've mentioned earlier, feeling the pinch of economic sanctions led by the U.S. North Korea is as well. In the latest rounds of sanctions, a cap on crude and refined oil exports to North Korea, a ban on all North Korean textile exports, and forbidding nations to authorize new work permits to North Korean citizens around the globe are just a few of the things being added to the list on the North Korean sanctions.
Well, President Trump was excited about the 15-0 vote on the sanctions, but said that it was nothing compared to what ultimately would have to happen. A North Korean ambassador to the UN said the forthcoming measures will make the U.S. suffer the greatest pain it's ever experienced in its history. Now, Peter Kusnik of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University said that North Korea feels that they need a nuclear program because this is a deterrent to stop the U.S. from invading and overthrowing them, and that's why they continue with their missile and bomb tests.
Amid the North Korean crisis, Secretary Mattis began his tour of U.S. nuclear air bases, including the Minot Air Base in North Dakota. It's the only base that houses two legs of the U.S. Triad defense system, which has strategic bombers and intercontinental ballistic missiles, making it ready to respond to any nuclear threat posed by North Korea. Well, Mattis said that it's necessary for the U.S. to keep all three parts of its Triad defense system in place in order to persuade any country that attacking the U.S. with a nuclear weapon would be suicidal.
Experts warn that we are living in the most dangerous time for nuclear war. Peter Kusnik said that almost all the experts believe that this is the closest that we've come to nuclear war since the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Now, he continued, this is a situation that needs to be diffused, but instead you have threats going back and forth from both sides. It's a dangerous situation. What Khrushchev and Kennedy learned with the Cuban Missile Crisis is once a crisis starts, you can't control it.
That's right. Well, he concluded saying a military solution isn't really possible. Instead, using what the Chinese and Russians are calling a freeze for freeze proposal, where basically North Korea freezes its nuclear program and bomb testing, and in turn we, referring to the United States, would finally settle the North Korean war, as well as the U.S. and South Korea stopping their war games, which is not helping. Instead, it's making the situation worse. Well, it's clear to see that most of the nations are prepared for war, but all nations are going to feel the effects of mankind rejecting the basic laws of peace. Well, pretty soon, because of mankind's actions and his attempts to try to bring peace through war, the luxurious living that he's so willing to fight his neighbor for is going to be thrust back to a time where the basic way of living, coupled with the tried and tested laws of peace, will cause mankind to examine his ways and realize that there is a friend in what he once thought was his enemy. Well, in order to find out more about how to make friends out of enemies, you can go to the Peaceful Solution website. That's by going to www.peacefulsolution.org. But you can also contact the House of Yahweh to find out about the scriptural laws of peace. And this is how you can do that. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, www.yahwehsbranch.com, or you can visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. If you'd like to email, you can email them at info@yahweh.com. Any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen. And once again, we're going to remind you of two great Bible study tools that are on the market, absolutely free, the Yisrael Says program and the Ask Yisrael program. And you can learn more about them by going to www.yisraelsays.com and www.askyisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, a man not only saying that we need peace, but showing the world how we can actually achieve it. Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.